Hey guys, what's up? This is my kind of my collection of thoughts and opinions on my experience with Sunset Overdrive now that I've finished the main story campaign and delved in this all the side. I got all the side missions done and I did most of the activities. The only thing I didn't get to try out was chaos mode, but we're going to talk about the main meat and potatoes of the game here. It opens with a character of your choosing, which we'll get into that afterwards. But basically, your character is a complete slacker. They escape to their apartment, and there's an unknown apocalypse going on at the moment when you begin the game. You don't really know quite all what's going on yet. All you know is there's big-ass mutant monsters that are chasing you, and you don't want to die. But it's a pretty decent opening. It kind of gets you right into the swing of things for the basic mechanics that you're going to need to know for the rest of the game, and just kind of eases you into it a little bit. It's kind of a tutorial, but it's not as annoying as some tutorials could be. Like, it doesn't stop every 5 seconds and explain something to you. It's a scroll of text and kind of break up the gameplay. No, it just kind of lets you keep going. The commands you need to do pop up at the bottom of the screen, and you just roll right along, which I like that. I hate, especially when I play a game multiple times, one of my biggest pet peeves is when the game has to stop and tell you, like, you got to do this, this, and this, and this, or this and this, and then it pauses for every freaking new thing you got to learn how to do, and if you've done it already, it's just monotonous and boring. So this is the way I like for the opening tutorials to be a little bit more play as you go, and it explains it to you. It's not stopping and giving you 3 pages of instructions you have to go through. That's just my personal thoughts on that kind of stuff. I like to fiddle around and learn from as I go, as opposed to having to read. Not that I'm opposed to reading, it's just boring when it comes to video games. You're also pretty much introduced to the main enemies you're going to fight. I mean, there's different types of OD monsters, but for the most part, it's the general, like, kind of running around monsters, and then as the game progresses, more and more Herkers. But you do come across flying enemies called wingers. It took me a minute to remember that. There's ones that throw like these ice grenade type of things. They stick to the grind lines that you ride around on and to the environment in general. There's these kind of like Resident Evil 2 liquor type of guys, and there's these dudes called poppers, which are your basic grunts, but they will explode when they get near you. They can be annoying. Also, you have some human enemies called scabs, which are just your basic run-of-the-mill humans with guns or melee weapons. And the last faction of enemies you come across in the game are the Physco robots, which they are by far my least favorite enemy to fight, just because they're dicks. But as I said, your player character's pretty much a slacker. They hide out in their apartment for 17 days and drink beer. So, I mean, you know, it establishes pretty early on that your character is a loser, but lovable, likable. And one thing about this game is all the characters are pretty likable, for the most part. But immediately, one thing that really stood out to me that surprised me, and I don't know, I'm sure it has a lot to do with the fact that Insomniac has had so much experience with pretty good looking games in the past. All the Ratchet and Clank games look pretty good. I can't speak of Fuse, but one thing that really shocked me about this game, and the features on the characters are slightly exaggerated. I mean, they're not like, you're not talking about Uncanny Valley here, but the animations are really, really good down to like little just subtleties in the way the eyebrows and the eyes and things move around and some of the facial expressions the characters make. I was really impressed with the facial animations and just the way the characters moved and stuff like that. I mean, I don't want to say it's lifelike, but it's convincing. You know, um, as I said, they have some. They're kind of exaggerated, and they're not. I mean, they're not photorealistic characters, which is fine. It's just that the way they were animated was done so well that if they would have went with like a more photorealistic look, it probably would have come across creepy. But that's one thing I definitely hats off to Insomniac Games for this one is the character animations. But anyways, getting back into the story, you find out your character works for Fizco, cleaning up junk and shit at their live events. And in this event, they're releasing their new drink, their new energy drink, Overcharge, which, as you can see, has the unintended consequence of turning people into monsters. So now that we've basically gone through the basic intro of the game, one thing I'd like to discuss before we move along further is the character creation. It's not as robust as say like Mass Effect or Skyrim or anything like that, but it's good. I mean, you can't change like their cheekbone structure and their jawline or anything like that, but you have quite a bit to pick from. You got two body types for males and two body types for females. Basically, it just short or small, medium, large, and extra large is basically how it kind of boils down to. You have some basic clothing options at the beginning of the game, which you unlock more as you play through the story, do side quests. You can earn some through the Chaos Squad and other activities in the game. You have different hairstyles. And as far as the faces, I kind of noticed that there's only like three basic faces, and then they just kind of change. Like they give them freckles or change the skin tone and stuff like that. But you can have, there's some diversity there. You have, a few ethnicities covered. You can make them look Asian, the black, whatever. Like I said, it's not as robust as Skyrim or some of the other games, like an RPG game, but there's quite a bit there. I mean, there's some options. I wasn't too crazy with the hair colors. I didn't like how some of them kind of appeared. Excuse me, but there's still something there for everybody. And you got to keep in mind the game is basically designed to be loud and over the top, so that definitely shines through in the character creation, and that's what gives the game its own identity. At the start of the game, you get to pick your basic look for your character, and then after that cutscene showing how the outbreak started, then you can fine tune a little bit of beer with body art, and then it opens up more options for clothing that you didn't have at the beginning of the game. So I mean, they give you something, a little bit of stuff off the bat. Now there's a few more options here that you're seeing that you may or may not have available depending upon whether or not you buy the DLC. I bought the season pass, and it gives you some character customization stuff that isn't in the base game, but it's all cosmetic. Nothing. They wanted you. Insomniac even said they wanted you to design your character around what you wanted them to look like. There's nothing. There's no bonuses for what you wear or anything like that. There's no uh, inherent perks for anything you wear. It's all just cosmetic, and none of the DLC stuff, as far as my opinion goes, is necessary for you to enjoy the game. It's all pretty much just like kind of some extra things here and there if you feel like shelling out the money for them. But like I said, there's some that are included in the season pass, and then there's a couple like microtransactions for like 99 cents or a buck 99. I can't remember off the top of my head the price for a couple. I think there's some guns and there's some outfits that you can buy individually. But like I said, that's kind of like your own personal thing if you want the outfits or not. It's not. gonna make or break the experience for you, because there's enough there in the base game that I think you'll be fine. I like having options, but at the same time, I tend to be one of those people that I gravitate towards certain things, and then I kind of stick with that in just about every game I play, regardless of whether or not there's any perks to the items that you equip, like usually armor pieces or things of that nature. So I mean, I kind of stuck with like maybe 7 or 8 basic outfits in the game, and that was kind of like what I went with. Um, but like I said, I mean, the whole point of it's to be loud and over the top, so you can mismatch and you can run around with your kangaroo cod piece or whatever. But I don't think you'll have a lack of variety, and really, you're only kind of limited to your how crazy you want to make your character look, or how normal you want to make your character look, or whatever. Because you can mix and match anything. But going back into the story, the OD monsters bust into your apartment, and Walter saves you. And this is basically the push to get the ball rolling. There's a few more kind of like, there's sort of tutorial missions. You don't really get the option to replay them, but they're not quite, they're not real hand-holdy. It just kind of eases you into the basics of the game and gets everything going for you. One thing I gotta say that I really did enjoy, though, is the boss fights. This is your very first real boss fight in the game. And the boss fights obviously are going to make use of the mechanics that are in the game, but since the mechanics work so well, it just adds to the enjoyment of the encounter. A lot of times, you know, like you got most games, like you get a boss that's just basically a big fucking bullet sponge, and I hate shit like that. Or false difficulty where there's like some stupid mechanic that if you don't do X and X, then you're gonna fail the encounter, you know. These just make use of what you're supposed to do throughout the core game, which is basically keep moving or you're gonna die. And it works well. And I don't know how much time they actually spent on that aspect of the game, but it's polished to the point where more often than not, if you do happen to die during an encounter, whether it be a boss battle, just a general mob, or anything like that, usually the mistake is on your hands. Also, especially with this fizzy balloon battle, the bosses have personalities, and that makes the battle that much better. Like, I mean, seriously, having this giant, kind of cute stuffed, or not stuffed, but giant balloon shit talking you and talking about how he's gonna kill your family and you're an asshole and stuff. I mean, that's awesome. Whoever thought of that is a fucking genius, because that's like one of my favorite boss battles in a game ever. Just because it's so goofy and stupid and weird and completely awesome. Nothing in this game, other than the production values, is serious. The game is just one big goofball fest of just the hundreds of pop culture references, and characters are constantly breaking the fourth wall, especially the player character, and it just brings about kind of that same sense of enjoyment that I had playing games like the original Borderlands and Bulletstorm, or I'm trying to think of some goofier games. It's kind of, man, they should have let Insomniac make the Deadpool game. That's, you know, I mean, that's kind of like what it reminded me of, is not the Deadpool game, but the Deadpool character, with like the kind of like you're this walking badass of destruction, but it doesn't really take everything real serious, and kind of has that nod and a wink at the people that are experiencing the media. And more often than not, the game gets things right more than it gets wrong. There was nothing in the game that really came across as like a game breaker or anything that was completely detrimental to the experience. Like I said, the characters are likable, if not eccentric. You have basic factions. You have Buck National, who's just like your stereotypical, like, kind of gun crazed hillbilly that's trying to just film what's going on so he can have like an internet TV show and show the world all the death and destruction and get some ratings and views and make money off of it. You have the troops, the Bushido troop that's shown here, where you have to find their lost troop master who was locked in a truck for, I think, 16 days, 17 days. And he had arms and hands at one, or arms and legs at one point in time, but it's heavily implied that he ate his arms and legs to survive while he was in the truck. So you have to carry him back to his troop, and then his kind of upstart wannabe that was trying to take his place drinks some overcharge and turns into a kind of a chest burster looking dragon, which I thought was kind of cool. You got the Fargothians, which are some LARPers that were having a horror night at the park when the OD apocalypse began, and their king is ill. You have to help get him back to health and get him food, and once you do, then they will help you out. You have the Oxfords, which are just kind of like, well, the one dude that basically you interact with the most, he's just kind of like a big old nerd. His name is Sam, and then the rest of them are just kind of like these, well, they're super intelligent dorks, but a couple of them are really stuck up. And then there's the Las Catrinas, which are cheerleaders that wear Day of the Dead paint and are taking care of sick children at the local hospital. It takes a while to earn their respect. But all the factions, maybe the exception of Las Catrinas, there's not a whole lot of development with them as far as their characters go, because they are the last faction in the game that you come across and get associated with and get to help you out. So they don't delve too much into them. Plus, they're kind of supposed to be sort of mysterious. But probably my favorite missions to get the faction to help you, and their side missions that they give you, are the Fargothians, whatever. Because their missions were just kind of like big tips of the hat to nerd culture and the whole LARPing and tabletop role-playing games and things like that. They were basically kind of like a lot of the things that I don't LARP or anything like that, but it was still like just their missions were fun and kind of goofy and lighthearted, and you got to headbutt a roller coaster with a Triceratops head on your face. So I mean, there was that. Some of the missions do become tedious. It feels like a lot of them feel like fetch quests, which is sort of tedious at first, and that may be because the one thing the game didn't really kind of come out and say right away was there is fast travel. So I did kind of get burnout with the fetch questy type of stuff, but it still keeps it interesting. The only thing that probably saved the fetch quest type of missions from feeling exceedingly boring and tedious is the fact that traversal is fun, and coming across enemies and fighting OD and scabs and stuff. You know, you get badges for doing everything. You get grinding badges, jumping or bounce badges, weapon badges, badges for killing certain types of enemies, and then you use those to buy overdrives, which the little lightning bolt gauge up in the corner, as it fills up for chaining together combos of grinds and bounces and kills and different things like that. As that gauge fills up, it unlocks different overcharges to you. You can create fire when you walk around or when you grind. It'll catch things on fire. Your melee attacks will shoot lightning bolts or fire or fireballs. When you jump and bounce off of something, what you bounce off of will detonate. Um, a few other things. There's one where you can have like a narrator throughout the game talk, like he'll make comments about what you're doing and things like that. Some of them are practical, some of them are just stupid and goofy and meant for shits and giggles. Getting as long as you keep moving and you're killing enemies, it's not too hard to keep your combo up and to keep your overdrive meter going. Most times mine didn't fall below like 2 or 3, and it's not really hard to get it back up, especially if you're in a large group of enemies. The upside to the whole situation is it's not detrimental if you do happen to lose your combos or your meter empties. You're still lethal, it's just not as stylish, and you won't have some of the perks going for you, but it's not going to lessen the impact of your weapons or anything like that. With your weapons, you can put amps on them, which, like you get a grenade launcher that shoots, instead of grenades, it's teddy bears with TNT strapped to them. And I had an amp on that in some instances, they would freeze. My pistol had an amp on it that some enemies, when they died, they would drop an explosive teddy bear, you know? So there's different amps and overcharges that you can get throughout the course of the game. You can get amps. There's certain parts of the game where you have these vats of the overdrive drink, or overcharge drink, where you have to protect the vats while Floyd's brewing amps for you. There's 3 or 4 that are part of the story, but then you can go back and do like night defenses and stuff like that. And I didn't do a lot of those because I didn't like them. They were kind of like a horde mode, and I don't know if I'm just an idiot when it comes to placing my traps, because when you do those, you are given time to prepare. You set down traps at your barricades, and that's supposed to dispatch some OD and then make your life slightly easier, but the traps didn't seem to make my life too much easier. I had a couple times where I did fail the brewing the amps because they got through and they destroyed my vats, but it's not exceedingly difficult. It's just not, it wasn't my thing. But at the same time, if you like the kind of horde mode type of thing, it might be up your alley. I don't mind it, but trying to keep track of all of them, keep moving, and then make sure my vats were protected just got a little, there's a lot of juggling and priorities. One big major downfall to the game is, while you can go into your menu and go back and replay missions over again, when you replay a mission, it does not have the cutscenes, which, as I said, with the character animations and the voice acting is top notch. But with the voice acting and the quality of the cutscenes, not being able to rewatch them was kind of I would put that as a negative for sure. And then you can only have one save per account profile. So if you decide you want to start over from scratch, you have to delete everything, or you have to create a new profile on your Xbox One to do that, which I thought was kind of it's kind of dumb in this day and age not to be able to have multiple saves. You know, I don't see why there's any reason to implement a system where you can only have one save. But you know, again, that's just me. Some people might feel differently. Getting into the technical aspect of the game, the frame rate is locked at 30 frames per second, which at first I thought was kind of weird because Insomniac always went with 60 for Ratchet and Clank games. So I thought that was kind of strange that they halved it for this game. It's pretty solid through most of the game. Now, when you get a lot of carnage going on and a lot of destruction, a lot of enemies on screen, and you're moving around and bouncing around, and your overdrive start kicking in, and you got a bunch of environmental effects going on, it will dip a little bit, but they're few and far between. And while it makes whatever's going on feel a little bit heavier, it's not. It doesn't slow to a crawl. It's just like a casual observer may not notice it, but people that pay attention to frame rates will notice it. 10 years ago, I might not have picked up on it too much, but nowadays I did notice it. So that, as far as the frame rate goes, that's all on you, whether or not you can handle that. I know there's a lot of people that refuse to play games that are 30 frames per second. The frame buffer, the game only is natively 900p, which, again, I thought was kind of strange, but given what the game is, the amount of just mindless chaos that's going on screen, the size of the world that you're playing in, and everything of that nature, I can kind of understand why they reeled that in a little bit. It's not that noticeable. There's a couple instances where there is some kind of ho-hum textures, and there is some texture fade that can be quite noticeable, but at the same time there's games that render in native 1080p that have fade in that's just as bad, and things like that. There's a couple of the outfits that look kind of bad, but I don't know that that's so much the resolution or the texture work. So it's hard. I can't really pinpoint what the cause is there, but all in all, again, that's all going to come down to your personal taste. For me, it didn't hurt the experience. The art style is vibrant enough that I don't think you'll really notice it too much. The thing that I noticed, and the only thing that really kind of bugs me in games, is there is some aliasing issues, and I can't really pinpoint why it bugs me so much, given the fact that for years I played on consoles, but it just kind of, I pick up on it a lot now, more so than I used to, but it's not, while it's noticeable, it's not a game breaker for me. Again, these are all going to be things that boil down to your own personal preference. The soundtrack's really good. They brought in bands to write music specifically for the game, so there are times where there's kind of like this punkish type of music that will kind of go along with the action on screen. You know, they'll mention Sunset City, and some of the things you're doing in the story missions will be referenced in the lyrics because those songs were written specifically for this game. There is like a more kind of synthy, kind of dubsteppy, more instrumental type of music for when you fight the Physco robots. And then there's not really a lot of ambient music that's just like kind of off in the background. It's, for the most part, I'd say 75% of the music is the kind of like in your face punk, kind of pop punk type of style, which fits well with the mood of the game, the style of the game, and the attitude of the game. The music fits really good, and it's complements everything that's going on. It's not one of those ones that where it's completely separate from the action that's going on screen. You know, like some games you play, like the music doesn't quite fit with what's like Destiny, for example. I felt like there was times where the music was a lot more epic than the actual action going on screen. You know, so that all kind of the overall presentation. What, like I said, while there's a couple things that kind of left me scratching my head, none of it, none of the negatives for me personally were strong enough to ruin the overall experience because everything else came together so well that I could overlook those things. But I'm gonna wrap this up because we've been kind of going on for a while. As I said, the overall presentation works. It's pretty solid as far as frame rate and response times go. The story is entertaining, but I mean, if you're looking for like the next like BioShock or Last of Us or anything like that, it's not a literary masterpiece. If you laugh at dick and fart jokes like I do, then the story will be fine for you. The characters, like I said, are likable, but again, if you're not into the story, you probably won't like the characters. They very much are a product of their environment, and some of them are sort of stereotypes, but it's not like terrible stereotypes. Nothing really like jumped out at me like, oh my god, somebody's gonna be bitching about this part, you know. Um, they're quirky, they all have their role, and they all fit in quite well within the overarching plot of the game. The enemies are nothing really groundbreaking and new. They are interesting. Some of them will change up the way you have to do things and will make you think fast because, like I said, you got to keep moving, or stillness is your downfall. You have to just keep going, grinding and bouncing and running around while you may survive for a little bit. Is not a good idea. There's a couple times where I did kind of stay on the ground and just run around a little bit, and it led to some close calls. But overall, this is a game that I've enjoyed every moment that I spent playing it. There was nothing that infuriated me or made me question why I was playing the game. I never reached a point where I was like, I got to put this down. I'm sick of it or anything like that. I looked forward to playing it every day that I did play it, and they kind of sequel bait you a little bit at the end, and that's okay with me because if they make a second one, that will be a day one purchase for me. I have loved every Insomniac game I played to varying degrees. I was a big fan of the Ratchet and Clank series. I liked the Resistance series. They kind of missed their mark a little bit here and there with that series, but overall, that was a solid series. I didn't play Fuse, but this is both an excellent addition to the Insomniac games library and an excellent addition to the Xbox One exclusive library. So if you do have an Xbox One and you got $30, $40, I don't know what it costs now. I picked it up for, it would have been $40, but I got it on sale. It is well worth the purchase, and you should probably give it a shot. Like I said, if you're into dick and fart jokes, you'll be amused. If you're not, you probably won't like the story. But the gameplay alone, if you ever kind of think like Ratchet and Clank meets Tony Hawk and whatever other goofy things you can think of. So if you want to run around and grind on power lines and rooftops and bounce off of cars and shoot explosive teddy bears at enemies and vinyl records, this game's for you. Other than that, I don't really have a whole lot to say because I'm going to go play the Mo Oil DLC and make some videos on that. But like always, guys, I want to thank you all for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Have a good one.
Wow, she hits hard. They neutered my nuclear sword.